Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Matty B. We got a big week this week with Pittsburgh still undefeated on the year. Got a big win against the Cowboys. I didn't think it was going to be close. I don't think a lot of people thought it was going to be close. I saw someone had bet a gigantic parlay that ended with the Steelers winning on Sunday. And that guy had to be sweating bullets, man, because he bet like $1,000 to win 40 grand, I think is what it was. And so he had a bunch of college games. And then at the end, he just had Steelers Cowboys. He probably thought, oh, that's a gimme. And then,
as it should have been,
Roethlisberger gets hurt, though. I don't want to blame it all on that, though, because they had issues with Garrett Gilbert from the XFL, Matt. And I've said it on the show before. You need film on a guy. You need film on a guy to scheme. And I think a lot of the NFL players that stick around for so long, it's due to preparation. I mean, you had the big Drew Brees and Tom Brady battle that didn't turn out to be a battle at all. Like, those guys have stuck around because of preparation. And I think that's where you're going to see, like, Andy Dalton comes in. He's not a spring chicken. Everyone knows how to play him. And so he just continues to look bad because tape's already out on him. He's not going to be breaking plays open like Dak's able to do. So when Gilbert comes in, they didn't know what to expect. And so they just kind of ran their base defense, and he was able to move out of the pocket, get some throws, and then breathe some life into the Cowboys, which technically they're not really out of it because the division's so bad. What were your thoughts on that game?
Well, just one of the things that you'd brought up as far as quarterback stuff's concerned, I think one of the reasons that you see Drew Brees and Tom Brady being able to have these longer careers is because look at the passes that they're being asked to throw in their offense. They're not being asked to do what like a Roethlisberger or even a Josh Allen with the Bills is doing, where they're saying drop back and unload at 50, 60 yards. A lot of their passes that they're throwing are these quick hitters. They're screens, they're perimeter stuff. So when you're not being asked to bomb the ball down the field, you can focus more on the timing and getting the ball out a little bit quicker. And I think that helps. Throwing a 3-yard slant. I know Michael Thomas catches a lot of flack because all he runs are slant patterns. And it's like he catches a slant that's 3-4 yards and then runs 70 yards to the end zone. And I think that's something that helps those guys. And I think that it's something that helps when you look at how Dallas was moving the ball. A lot of it wasn't taking shots down the field. It was getting the ball in space.
Talking about taking shots down the field, that was the Steelers' entire offense. I was going crazy because Roethlisberger was just kind of just sitting back and just throwing it deep. It was like his arm tired. He's like, I'm going to see if I can just stretch my arm out a bit. It was like he was at practice.
But that's like with Roethlisberger is the exception to the rule. Like, he does stuff that no conventional quarterback can and should do, but it works for him. That's why he's not going to be a guy that's going to play another 10 years in the league, which should press Pittsburgh into being the reason why they should be seriously looking at addressing the quarterback position to make sure that they have the guy that they need for the future, because otherwise you're looking at another dry run.
Matt, years ago on the show, I was saying that I didn't even think he'd be playing this year. And I think the injury helped him just in terms of getting another year and hopefully staying fresh. That's why I thought when he went down with the knee, I thought, ooh, that looked like an MCL. And so I go on Twitter, of course, so I type in Roethlisberger MCL. So then there's like all the armchair doctors saying, oh, that's an MCL sprain. And I'm like, okay, as long as it's not a tear. And then everyone's like, he's going to come back. And so I'm like, all right, good. And so then he comes back in, and I'm like, great. He's like shaking his knee. He's like pointing at it. It's like, okay, calm down. Everyone knows you're hurt. You already went to the locker room. Like they sent you out. They did the x-rays or whatever they needed to do. And so you're good now. But like, just calm down, because it's like he's running around taking shots, not checking the ball down. Like you would think after how many deep throws? 10? Like, I don't.
He's in that mode of Favre. Just drop back and rip it.
But at some point, it's like, hey, you got some shots. Like, why don't you just check down and move the offense. And then you had a feeling like I wasn't really threatened by the Cowboys. I know they had the lead. The Steelers had to come back. But it was kind of like, all right, well, I don't want to say they weren't prepared, but it was kind of like, wow, the Cowboys, that's like typical Cowboys for the past decade. They had a game, they could be up. I thought they were 2 games behind, but the Eagles had a tie. I forgot about that. So they're 3-4-1, and then the Cowboys are 2-7 now. So they could have been a half game back in the division. Now they're like a game and a half because of that tie. And the division's so bad. Will someone win it with 5 wins, 6 wins? I know people joked about the 7-win thing years ago because every couple of years you get a 7-win team in. It's like, well, how bad is the East going to be? I know they play each other, so there's some wins built in, but I don't know.
But I think it's funny that you're going to have this 5-win team hosting a playoff game because they're the division winner.
Well, that's where I think some of the realignment stuff, and I understand the division stuff, it's built in and it's good, but some of that really, does it matter now for playoffs? I don't know. Maybe the salary cap stuff, it's good for regional rivalries and things like that. And I think you should get the benefit because what if there is a division that's super tough? Or maybe just 2 teams are awful in one division. I think it's very rare that you have 4 teams in the same division that are just so bad. Because even just looking around, there's at least one top team in each division, and then another team battling them. The other division that has a virtual tie is the NFC West or the NFC South. But the East is so bad that it doesn't even matter at this point. It's one of those teams, they're all in the negative differential. Most of their wins are in the division themselves, which is just a bad look. Philly's 2 of their wins are in the division. Washington's 2, both of their wins are in the division. Both of the Giants' wins are in the division. And then the Cowboys have 1. So if they only win in the division, you only play 6 games. I think they're all pretty much halfway done there. If you lose every other game, where are the extra wins coming from? So you're looking at something that, in terms of that division and the Eagles, which I love seeing them lose, but I would hate to see them squeak into the playoffs. Although I don't think Wentz is the answer, so they're just prolonging it.
But the longer that they drag it out, I think it's just making it that much clear that Peterson's really he lost everything when all of his offensive assistants and Nick Foles left.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say, I've been talking highly on Foles, but he's lost 3 in a row with the Bears. And at some point, I'm like, all right, maybe the tape's out on him. But in my defense, I still think the Eagles knew what they had in Wentz. They knew, because of the reports coming out, that the locker room didn't like it. So in my mind, they should have just kept Foles. I think it would have been cheaper. Get rid of Wentz, trade him for pieces, whatever you need to do, get Foles some more weapons, take another run, maybe try to go back-to-back instead of cratering, and then use those pieces and try to get draft picks or whatever for Wentz, and then draft and take another shot at getting a top quarterback. Because now, by keeping Wentz, getting Foles out of there, you're in no man's land for 3 more years, 2 more years, unless you get lucky with a stud quarterback in the draft that's going to be able to take you up. I mean, you're not in a good look. You're not in a good place. And so that's where I said, okay, maybe Foles isn't a long-term solution. He was already how old when they won the Super Bowl? Just keep him. Try to keep the magic going for another year or 2. And then, because I think it was pretty clear at that point that Wentz wasn't the answer. He was always getting hurt. Locker room issues. And now look where they're at. So I stand by that. I know people question it. They're like, why are you always talking about Nick Foles? He's not that good. I'm like, it's not just one person. It's not like he's Tom Brady. It's what he meant to the franchise. And the Eagles were just kind of like, all right, later. And so it kind of doomed them. They hitched everything to Wentz, and now they're down. So,
well, I think that was at the time. it made more sense because he was more talented. Yes, it did.
No, they were just going for the jersey sales. They thought Wentz was like their guy, and I know he got hurt. I mean, how many guys get hurt and then have their backup win the Super Bowl? Like, that's all Tom Brady got in for the most part. And so then, like, what? Could you imagine if Tom Brady never would have played again?
It would have been plausible had they have traded Brady instead of Bledsoe.
Yeah, see, the Eagles should have learned from that. They should have said, wow, we had one guy that won the Super Bowl. Let's go back to the other guy.
But I think their mindset was the Patriots went with the younger guy and it paid off. So they were going to go with the younger guy and it was going to pay off.
Just because a guy's young doesn't mean he's a winner. You got to go with the winner.
Well, I know that, but the Eagles didn't. That's why I feel he's a mess.
And that's good for me. I hate the Eagles, so perfect. So we have that. I think most of the other games, Raiders won again, though.
Of course they did.
They're getting up there. I'm watching them creep up. If they get to 8 wins soon, then I think we can reach back out. Because that was our mailbag question. Actually, I don't even know if I read it last week. Let me bring that up because I haven't even been doing the mailbag because coronavirus and we weren't really sure. But here's our question. So does John Gruden just decide when he wants to put together a great game plan? Or how does that work? Did he decide not to put together a good game plan the 2 weeks before that and the week before that?
Well, see, that's the benefit of being a great coach is you can pick and choose when you want to turn it on.
Because I said that he beat the Chiefs in there, so that's why there was like a thing, and I was trying to read it because I paraphrased it so it made sense. But yeah, I said, look, John Gruden beat the Chiefs. Now he wins.
He's too busy fighting the NFL because they keep taking all of his draft picks from him because they're wrongfully accusing him of not wearing his mask.
The Steelers got fined for that too. I don't think we brought that up. That was one of the, I mean, I know we talked about it earlier in the year, but speaking of that, the Steelers are in quarantine right now. Vance McDonald tests positive on Monday, and they put the 4 guys in contact with him, including Ben Roethlisberger, into quarantine. What that means is they don't get to practice this week. And I think they can return on Friday or Saturday. And so just to kind of cross this over with college, because I know college is having a ton of cancellations right now. Like Wisconsin's coming back, and I think their final report is like they had like 15 to 18 players out. Like those guys are coming back from a 3-week Big Ten quarantine where they haven't practiced. So that has to be
I'm
tough.
sure they're coming back in top shape.
They probably are. I mean, I don't know. Like Trevor Lawrence for Clemson, he was on the sideline at Notre Dame. So, I mean, they knew he wasn't contagious. But because of the heart issue from that one report, they're like making them go through conditioning again before they can get back on the field. So the NFL luckily isn't doing that. Because I think if you start to do that with like all the injuries and everything, this entire year would be a mess. So I'm hoping that the Steelers can get back to having everyone play on Sunday. But again, it's like kind of a revolving door. Some players are out. Some of them you don't know. They play the Bengals. Is it going to be a tough game? I mean, it's another unknown quarterback with not a lot of tape. I wouldn't put it past them to put up a big game. I mean, look what Gilbert did. So I don't know. I think the Steelers will win. It's another good chance to just keep winning. And then if Ben does get banged up or later in the season, I wonder if at some point you just rest him. Like, would it make a difference? I don't know. Because I guess it depends on this. Do you have a chance at the bye? Because the bye is going to be, I think only one team gets it this year because it's a 7-team thing. So you'd have the 3 games, and then those 3 winners would play. 2 would play each other, and 1 would play the bye team. So if you have a chance for that, which right now they do, they're going to be battling the Chiefs. The Chiefs still only have 1 loss, that Raiders loss we talked about. And the Bills and the Titans are right behind with 2 losses apiece. I guess the Ravens, too. You can throw them in there. But that's going to be the one where if the Steelers beat the Bengals, they play the Jaguars, and then you get the Ravens again. If they beat that Ravens team, you have to be thinking, get the bye. Because, I mean, and if, like, let's say they drop a couple games and they're in the playoffs, like, safely, that's whenever I think you start looking at, okay, let's rest them a few weeks, have them play the last week against the Browns to just stay in game shape, and then just go into the playoffs from there. Because, like, there's a 2 or 3 week stretch there where, I mean, you could play the Bills December 13th and then just rest Roethlisberger against the Bengals and the Colts. Let Rudolph get some meaningful snaps just in case. And then, like I said, let Ben play against the Browns so that he has a week to get back up to speed and see what happens. It might help with some of the offensive line stuff. They're not getting a push on the offensive line whenever they try to run the ball. And I thought the one play they did, and they had McFarland, and I thought, wow, he looks like he has some burst, which I knew coming in from Maryland, the rookie. I was like, why don't they play him more and just try to put it in? But I think it's a scheming thing because I saw some of the Cardinals plays, and Kingsbury does the same exact thing. Whenever Drake's in, like they took him and just tried to make him a power running back. All of his plays go like right up the middle. And then they have Edmonds as like the third down back that kind of gets out of the backfield and catches some passes. Like they need a guy that just they need to call plays like Le'Veon Bell's back there. And I thought, well, maybe he just doesn't have it. But Drake gets injured. And then Kingsbury makes Edmonds go in like he's a power back too. So I'm like, okay, at some point it's not the running back. That's on the coach. Like who puts their guy in knowing that he's like a shiftier back? And like that's what I don't understand with Connor. Like they keep trying to pound him up the middle. And that's where I'm going with this. Like at some point it has to be on the offensive coaches to be like, this isn't working.
Well, Jalen Samuels is one of the players that were identified in that COVID quarantine. So they could be down a running back yet to boot this week.
But they can, I understand they need to get some movement up the middle and they need to do other things. But to do like those delayed handoffs and things, Ben's not a threat to run. So like just having those, and you're not under center, like you're not doing power eye type stuff where he's going to be moving it. Why not run some sweeps, run some other stuff, like try to get it up. I understand doing some draws, but like when you're doing it like multiple times in a row and you're getting no push, and like what even were the stats in that game? It's like, okay, things aren't working. I think at one point I looked at it and it was like a yard of play, and I was like, holy crap. So their rushing was 2.6 yards a carry. I'm like, you're just running into the middle of nowhere. Like, why do you keep running these? And I brought up McFarland. He actually only rushed for 7 yards. So he probably had one good run, and then that was it. They stopped him there 2 times, and they were like, all right, that's it. You're done. So, I don't know. I don't even know what they could do, but I just wondered, like, how about you mix it up? Like, why don't you run some counters? Like, try to do something. Get some guys pulling. Maybe that's not your offense. You don't want to put that extra strain on the offensive line. I get it. But you got to do something. Because, like, 2.6 yards a carry, that's not going to help you in the playoffs. And if something did happen to Ben, like, Mason Rudolph coming in and just throwing screens isn't going to do it. Mason Rudolph averaged 1 yard a completion. So, not good. It's not like he's out there slinging the ball downfield like Roethlisberger was. So. Anything else on that?
No, I think that they can continue making progress. I think you hit the nail on the head. They're going to go as far as Ben allows them to go, but it seems like Roethlisberger plays a lot better when he's banged up and injured and everything else. Like it seems like for whatever reason when he's like has like 19 different injuries, he just stands back there and just slings it. So like it's almost like, oh well, maybe it's a good thing that he has that going on. I don't know.
Well, I think it helps him because he knows he wants to get the ball out instead of like running around and taking shots. But I I did see that he was like one of only 2 quarterbacks. I think the other one was Peyton Manning, that has like 3 different decades he has had a winning streak of over like 8 games or something like that. So crazy stat. I didn't even know Peyton Manning did it because like that first decade he was out of Tennessee for like 1 or 2 years. So that would have been like almost a rookie year. He's going on a winning streak that long. So crazy. Anything else you got for the NFL? I think I hit on most of my talking points.
The one that's kind of been surprising lately is Atlanta winning games. With firing Quinn, they've won.
Well, they weren't supposed to be bad in the first place.
They weren't. The issue that I had with them out the get-go was they have this massively, almost Madden-esque offense where they just have like all these weapons, but then defensively they let the majority of the guys that were on their defense from the Super Bowl team go, and it was almost like they're only rebuilding half of their team. So it's like we'll put this like high performance offense with a crap defense and then roll it out there and be like, well, see if you can just score one more point than that we give up. So I've just been impressed that they haven't completely tanked and that they're kind of battling their way back into contention.
Well, I think the NFC is going to be more interesting than the AFC because up to this point, you thought like the Buccaneers were that number 1 team. They get killed by the Saints. The Packers have had a few bad games. The Saints have also had a few bad games. And now the Seahawks. So it's like all the top teams are having these awful games. I guess you could consider the Dallas game an awful game for the Steelers, even though they won. But like all the NFC teams, they've had their own share of blowouts. Like I know the Seahawks kind of battled back, but when Russell Wilson throws a couple picks, it's like they're done. Like you can put up points, but when you're putting your defense in bad spots, I think if he goes back to where he was, and I want to say both their losses were when he had bad picks. The Arizona one, I honestly blame it on coaching. Like I said, you have a running back that you could be using like Le'Veon Bell, where you're able to get him touches, throw screens or whatever. And that's what you do whenever he's your third down back. And I was thinking like, oh, maybe Drake's not the guy they thought he was whenever they traded for him or whatever. But it's like, okay, that's on the head coach. Like when your number 1 running back, his only job is to be a decoy and to just plow into the line. Like that's on you. And that's going to give your quarterback a ton of shots because I know that's part of your read game. But there are so many different looks you can do out of there, like delayed counters. You could do like a speed option type look. Just give him a pitch out in space. Like there are different things. Like you can even delay it. Have Murray take 2 steps towards the line and then do like a toss. But to just hand it off like 10 times a game, like right up to the middle, and no one's buying it. And then whenever they do work, it's because Murray pulls it and he runs it. And then, we don't even know if he's durable. So what are you going to do at some point? And that's where I think like Lamar Jackson, when he's getting into his issues, it's the same thing because they didn't come out on fire this week either. I don't think. Can't remember. This week or a different week I was watching. So those are the ones where I'm like, okay, you can run that offense, but you're in the same boat as the Steelers then. Like everyone can keep picking on the Steelers run game. It's like your other top teams that are running the spread, they're not doing any better. Like their numbers are boosted because the quarterback pulls it every once in a while and gets a good run in. But come playoff time, that's not going to happen because they're not going to be running the score up on like these garbage teams. Those teams don't make the playoffs. So like when the Steelers were able to shut Lamar Jackson down when he was running, he had some points and they came back, but for the most part, he was pretty well contained. You're going to have to throw the ball or try to get creative. Maybe they're waiting on it. I don't know. Like, I wonder if that offense would be better instead of just going for the shiftier guys if they just got like a Derrick Henry. And they're just like, okay, we're just going to feed you. And I don't think any of the spread teams have a running back that's built like that. Not off the top of my head. So that could be what puts one of those teams over the edge. Like if Baltimore could get a beast running back like that.
Well, they have Dobbins, but they choose to give it to that Edwards who fumbles and carries the ball loosely. So that plays to Pittsburgh's advantage down the road.
Yeah, but Dobbins is the same type of speed back. Like he's not going to be the guy that pounds it up the middle. So you almost have to use him as like your change of pace. Like, yeah, he could break a lot of stuff in college, but in the NFL, his speed's not going to be able to put him over the edge all the time. So that's the kind of guy that would be like your change of pace back, almost like how Steelers used Willie Parker back in the day. That it's kind of like, all right, that's a different guy, and he's really giving defenses issues. And that's why I thought, oh, great, here come the Ravens. But if their base stuff isn't really working, then it's not really a threat. So if you're going to use him and just like pound it up the middle like they do with James Conner, which also doesn't fit that mold, so it leaves me scratching my head like, what are you doing? So I don't know. That's my final thoughts. Tom Brady, it's okay, guys. I know my man, he had a bad week. He smashed his helmet on the sideline. I felt so bad for him. But he'll be back. It's a Sunday night game. Maddie's not used to big games.
Jameis is out there eating another dub.
I don't even know, like, the rest of the schedule. That division, like I said, like Tom Brady could get to the Super Bowl this year. He might not. Because they've had their bad weeks where they haven't showed up, and they lost to the Saints both times. So, like, it would only make sense for them to meet in the playoffs and beat them. Like, that's usually how it works. You get them twice, and then in the playoffs, whatever team, if you play them 3 times, it usually doesn't work out the third time. So, and that's just not a Tom Brady thing. That's like any team normally. But we'll see. They got to play the Falcons twice. They also get some good ones against like the Lions and the Vikings. But they have the Chiefs and the Rams, which are both going to be fighting for seeding and, like I said, playoff spots. So those are coming. They got to go on the road to Panthers. We'll see if they rebound. The Panthers are like a team that's kind of right there, but I think injuries like McCaffrey set them back, and they're like the opposite. It doesn't matter who's in a running back; they're giving him great looks. So, like, if you're thinking like, oh, he's just going to talk trash on all the coaches with how they use the running backs, like, no. Watch what the Panthers have been doing, because when McCaffrey's in, he seems like he's always getting the ball in space, always being able to make a move. He gets injured. Everyone thinks, oh, there goes their offense. Davis steps right in, doing the same exact thing. It's like they didn't even miss a beat. So some of that, it's like, okay, then McCaffrey comes back, and it looked perfect, like he was 100%. Now they said his shoulder's banged up. So I don't know how that will keep him out in the games or whatever, but that's how you look at a coach, and you're like, that's how we're going to use our running backs. We know how we got them. We know what they like. Let's give them the ball in space and move the ball with them. So that's what I would like to see more from the Steelers, if they're going to do that, because like 2 yards a carry, it's not cutting it. So that's my final thought. You have anything else?
Nope.
Because I'm gonna actually do a quick recon. I know the Panthers lost to the Chiefs, but because I brought up the yards per carry, like McCaffrey averaged like 3.8 yards per carry, so not super, like a lot more than what they did, but just in terms of like receiving, McCaffrey had like 8 yards of reception. And so, like, he was able to just get out there in space. Like, you don't have to just hand him the ball up the middle. Like, do other little things. Do like the shuttle pass, whatever. Whatever you need to do to get your playmakers the ball. That's what I want to see. So, before we get into college football, got a little bit of like our high-tempo stuff, which I should just bring back since coronavirus seems to be not limiting sports anymore. But the NHL announced that they are considering a temporary realignment for this upcoming season to try to get around the travel restrictions, which I assume would be Canada. Because, like, if they're able to play all the other sports in America, like in the NFL, there's no travel restrictions. So what would they be talking about? And like I said, I wondered because that was my one thing, where the NHL, they keep talking about, oh, you need all these teams, we have all this stuff. Like, what if if they're hurting that bad for viewers, and maybe they're not, because I know a lot of the TV ratings, they don't include Canada in them. So you can say, like, oh, they only had 3 million, but if you add in the numbers from Canada, maybe they beat the NBA numbers. I don't know. At least I don't think they have them in. But what if you just did United States division and a Canada division, and then just had them play, and that was the Stanley Cup? Because they talked about the complaints about, like, oh, Canada's never in the Stanley Cup. Like, what if you just made it so that they were always in it? You'd have to move a lot of teams around, and it would never work. Like, you would have to either add teams up there or, like, just move. And there are so many in the United States that are just, like, legendary franchises that they wouldn't move. But I've always thought that, like, you've been adding teams in Seattle and, like, Las Vegas. Like, what if you just said, like, we don't care. We already have the United States, the teams that are going to watch, they're going to watch. Let's just try to expand in Canada and try to do, like, a north versus south instead of east versus west. So, I don't know. They're looking at, like, a 72-game schedule for the NBA as well. And they did, like, their audit, and they're trying to start before Christmas. Because if they don't get those extra, like that extra payday from the holidays, they're going to be way behind, they said, in terms of revenue and money and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see for those other sports. But anything you got on them?
No.
I did have one more for baseball. The Detroit Tigers hired Chris Federer away from Michigan. It's like, why? Why would you do that? Michigan was really close to winning a national championship. Why don't you just let us have our coach for a couple more years?
A couple more years.
Like, come on, Tigers. Well, because I followed, our coach followed like the Vanderbilt type plan where they had made it to the national championship, used that to boost recruiting, which is what Michigan did. And then, of course, the coronavirus hit. So our window might be closed. I don't know. Because I'm not sure what the roster is going to look like or what college baseball is going to look like now. But Vanderbilt, it took them a couple of tries, and then they won like national championships built on that. So, but you can't be losing your coach. Not if he's awesome. But good luck going into the Major League Baseball. Probably a big step up for him. But I'd give him a shout out. And another fan favorite, Matt, Tommy Tuberville, winning election. And I said, his first order of business, because, like, let's be honest, I don't know. He probably wouldn't have the authority to do this in Alabama, but he should write a bill that claims the 2004 national championship and award himself the trophy. Because you're laughing, but you know it makes sense. They should have gotten it that year. The bowl game, I looked it up, was a little bit closer than I remember, but they were undefeated. USC had all their issues. I think they already vacated it. So there's no champion, right? So just claim it. Write your own bill. Come out there. I know he's in Alabama. It probably would ruin his re-election bid. But, like, you got it. Live it up.
Just give yourself kickbacks.
Because that would be something that, like, oh, yeah. And I bring that up because, like, Alabama and LSU, they get postponed because of coronavirus. So, like, oh, yeah, by the way, your team, your game, it's not going to be played, coronavirus, but we're going to celebrate something a little bit different. We're going to celebrate an Auburn National Championship 2004. And then he brings all the guys back because 2004, USC vacated. There's no champion. So if you go back and look at that final poll, which I have it up right now. Of course, I can't show it. USC was 11-0 with their asterisks because they lost the last two games. I don't know why they were forced to vacate 2 wins. Auburn, also 13-0. They were also in the SEC, so I don't know how that was overlooked. Utah was also undefeated. That was the Urban Meyer year. So I always said Utah should claim it because that was the one year that I think that they could just say, like, hey, remember when we were national champs? And no one would bat an eye. I mean, they beat 9-time national championship Pittsburgh Panthers in their bowl game. So, like, that's a big time win, Matt. So, that's how BYU got theirs. Remember, 1984, they beat 11-time national champion. I guess it would only been 10-time national championship. The Michigan Wolverines in 1984. Even though Michigan was only 8-4 in that bowl game, they still claimed that national championship and they still got it. What are you laughing at?
Nothing.
You don't think Pittsburgh Panthers are a powerhouse? Because I had some extra numbers for you that I sent you on Saturday because they played a big game against Florida State. They are now in the all-time series. Pitt has the advantage, 6-4. They also have gigantic margins of victories. I mean, They haven't lost to Florida State in years. I think like the last game they lost and we were at was almost a decade ago now.
It was a national championship year.
Oh yeah, the crab leg year. That's right.
Look, just because you barely remember the last time that Michigan won a national championship, don't be a hater.
How could I forget? They always show Charles Woodson every college football commercial.
I know. Gag me.
Doesn't that make you mad? Florida State has all those champions. They never show them ever.
It is what it is.
Because the latest one is like what? Charles Woodson, he's like yelling at Baker Mayfield. So funny.
It's not funny. It's not funny at all.
And he walks out on the set of the Fox carrying his Heisman Trophy. Could you imagine if you just carried it around with you? Speaking of big time programs, with national champions and Heisman winners, Notre Dame.
Oh, here we go.
Notre Dame. No. I'm getting there. Notre Dame. They're out there playing Clemson. I know we already said Clemson didn't have Trevor Lawrence. After the game, they rushed the field. And I think, why? Why is Notre Dame rushing the field? Has Michigan ever rushed the field? Not that I was, well, of course, we didn't have many big moments when I was there, but we did beat Notre Dame that one time, and I was in the student section, and we didn't rush the field. And so I thought, well, I guess whenever you're used to it, you don't rush the field. So they beat Clemson, rushed the field.
So you weren't ranked in the top 5 either.
Matt, oh my gosh. Some people beat top 5 teams. So Notre Dame rushes the field and puts all their team at risk. All their team at risk. The president, who was also at an event without a mask in the past and got coronavirus, he sends out a thing where they're like threatening students to withhold transcripts, and they need to get exit tests to make sure that they're not sick, and you're not able to register for classes and things like that, which to me is just crazy because, like I had said, we've been at games, security's right there. And I was even at an NC State game when they beat Clemson, and I went down because I thought, oh, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna rush the field. And then the cops come up and they're like, don't even think about it. We'll just arrest you right now. I thought, well, never mind then. We'll just stand here and just be like neck to neck.
They can't arrest all of us.
Everyone's right there. That was a big game. One of Dabo's Clemsoning moments where they're like in the top whatever, and NC State won, and I thought, oh, perfect. I always wanted to rush the field. And every big time win, Matt, no one rushes the field. So I guess you'd have to be a Notre Dame fan to have that privilege if you're lucky enough to be at one of their big wins. But crazy. Because I thought, like, how, not even just putting your team at risk, but I know it's against the ACC rules. And then, did you see, since I was talking about Pittsburgh, Narduzzi came out and he was complaining about Notre Dame, saying that they should just join the conference. Why are we giving them 5 easy games outside of the conference? Or I don't know if maybe he meant in the ACC. For all I know. He just said that there were easy games that Notre Dame gets a year. So why give them those wins? And I have to agree. Do you have a thought on that?
Well, first off, Pat, how about you just win the games that are on your schedule and quit looking off someone else's paper? Like, don't worry about what Notre Dame's doing when you beat Florida State. But then you go and you lay an egg the previous 2 or 3 weeks before that. You have one of the better teams that you've had since you've been at Pitt, and you haven't been able to capitalize on it. And we sit here and we talk about he's a defensive minded coach. His defenses get absolutely throttled the last couple weeks. So like you can't be heralding your defense and trying to be this tough team when you're just getting your ass kicked every week. Like at some point there has to be the roster's flipped. It's your guys. Like you have to get it done. He has to be on the hot seat.
He's 4-4. They're not going to get rid of him. We'll save our hot seat talk. But I'm saying in terms of Notre Dame, I think he's onto something, and I'm wondering if he's just trying to push them. Because like I've said before, and I thought it more over the weekend because the Clemson Notre Dame game was on NBC. And I brought up because everyone keeps saying, well, the NBC contract is too valuable for Notre Dame. Number one, no, it's not. Purdue makes more money now per season than Notre Dame gets. Rutgers gets more money now than Notre Dame gets because of the television contract with the Big Ten Network. And it works. It's equal all the way through the Big Ten and the SEC. They all get more money than Notre Dame. So I was like, well, what's NBC even paying for? So I brought it up. These were the games this year. And just keep in mind, this was for an entire ACC year. Because normally you wouldn't even get this many big games. Like their games, Notre Dame's big games would be like what, maybe USC if they were playing that game at home. Because NBC can only show their home games. So they got Duke, South Florida, Florida State, which unfortunately would have been a good game. They're just having a down year with a new coach. Louisville, which probably is going to be like the second top game, which again isn't even a big game. I looked at the numbers. They had 4 million people watch that, which in terms of like NBA numbers, that's good for them. But in college football, I think most games have like 5 million that are the big time games. So a little bit lower there than normal. Then they have Clemson, and then they get Syracuse, which even a number one Notre Dame, which I don't think they would be ranked number one at that point. Is that going to bring in big numbers? Syracuse? Probably not. I think they said that the Clemson Notre Dame game has been the most watched game of the year. It's at 9 million. Just to put in context, the Ohio State beatdowns of Michigan the past couple of years have all been over 10 million viewers. So that's pretty close to those numbers of like a big time rivalry because Clemson and Notre Dame's not that. But just think if the ACC pitched it and said, hey, what if we had Notre Dame join? Would you buy out our game or buy out the contract with them and just pick the best game of the week with the ACC or Notre Dame and put it on in that 7 o'clock slot? Because then you would have the Big Ten noon game on Fox, which they've been playing like the best Big Ten game. Then you have the CBS game at like 3:30. NBC seems to like that 7 o'clock slot with Notre Dame. Sometimes they put it up against the SEC game, but realistically, you don't have to. And then, of course, ABC would keep their traditional 7:30 or 8 o'clock game. So you would at least have 2 games going head-to-head at night. You might not win every night, but it has to be better than what they're putting out there. And I think it would just be better for the ACC. It might get them on par money-wise, and especially pick Notre Dame back up. Because like NBC looking at those numbers, like those are poor numbers. Like if Rutgers and Ohio State like play and they get 5 million people watching that game, and that's beating the second best game that Notre Dame's delivering to you, you're not going to pay them top dollar. Like you're just not at that point. So it's something where maybe Narduzzi's speaking out, but maybe he's onto something. Because I always thought like, oh, Notre Dame will never join the ACC. But why would they join the Big Ten at this point? Because like if they are focused on recruiting and they want to keep that Florida stuff, they should just come in and say like make a Big East division and let's get back and see if that gets us our recruiting back. Because you would be playing Miami. You'd be playing, it's basically the Coastal Division. Maybe you flip the Tar Heels back. I don't know what the balance would be. But as an ACC guy, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, to me, it makes sense to have Notre Dame be in there, and even if it means bringing them in and then trying to look at some of the reorganization within the ACC, it's not going to hurt. And I definitely think from a viewership standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to do that. I think it's even with a bad Notre Dame team, you're still going to end up making money because of the viewers. And eventually, when a lot of this COVID stuff goes away, that when fans are allowed to attend the games, you're going to get that additional ticket revenue, knowing that they're a team that sells. And you've talked about that a good bit on previous shows, that scheduling Notre Dame, you're going to get the fans following.
And I mean, just in terms of like elevating the entire conference, because I don't even think there would need to be that big of a shift. Because I'm bringing this up right now. In the Atlantic, you would have Boston College and Syracuse and potentially Louisville. So I would say maybe 3 teams that you'd want to shift. And then maybe you just flip like North Carolina, Duke, and Georgia Tech. And try to keep like the Virginia Tech, Miami, Pitt, Notre Dame. And I mean, you'd have to add another team, so maybe that flips one of those other schools back. But then, even with that, it kind of balances everything out, because in the Atlantic, then you would have the four North Carolina schools. You would have like Florida State, like that traditional ACC coming in with them and Clemson. You'd get Louisville out of that division, and you'd kind of have the best of the rest in the Coastal then, kind of saying like, okay, well, we have our two beasts, Florida State and Clemson, in one division. Everyone else is in the Coastal. Like Notre Dame, we're begging you to come in and step up. Like we put Miami in that division. It hasn't happened for them. Virginia Tech's been close, but they're not consistent anymore. Like Beamer Ball's gone. So you come into the division, you could just take over. Take over and become that Clemson or that Florida State in the Coastal side, and then give us that viewership in the championship game. Because like right now, Notre Dame's never playing that weekend. And you're going to give them a chance to say like, look, this is the perfect balance. You're not going to get in another conference. If you join the Big Ten, like they already have a scheduling mess with Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State all in the same division. Like they're going to put Notre Dame out west. Like they would have no more key games. Like it doesn't make sense for them to join unless like the Big Ten could pull like something crazy off and get like Texas to come with them or something. But I just don't think it. I think it makes so much more sense if you pitch in your ACC and you say like, look, we're falling behind in terms of revenue. You're not going to get the big contract because, like, let's be honest, you're not delivering the numbers, Notre Dame. Like, our Clemson, Florida State games get better viewers than, like, your Notre Dame versus South Florida games or whatever else you're throwing out there. So that's why you came to the 5-game agreement in the first place. But, like, come on in and get that, because I think immediately, and just in terms of, like, Pitt, I think that elevates their recruiting back to where they used to be a decade ago. And I always say about bringing one step back, maybe if you had a consistent, like a power schedule and like you said, a team that sells, like you're saying, like we play Notre Dame in our division, we're going to play them every year, not just every couple random years. Maybe we can get Penn State on or West Virginia more regularly then. Because I mean, to be honest, at that point, I would beg for West Virginia to join. Because why not? Because I think that would give you that last team for that division and just really balance things out for almost like an old Big East, which is basically what it would be.
Well, and one of the things that I've always argued with or been frustrated with Pitt's scheduling is that the rivalry games for Pitt are non-existent at this point, because the three biggest rivalry games for them, Penn State, they're not playing, West Virginia, they're not playing, and Notre Dame, they're not playing. So you have like there's no non-conference rivalry games that Pitt has, that typically in years past they've had at least one, if not two or three of those games on their non-conference slate.
And if you look at just distance, it's not close. Like they're kind of, I know West Virginia's on an island in the Big 12, but Pitt's kind of on their own there. I mean, they drive down to like Virginia Tech, but up to Syracuse, but like they're kind of just up at the top west corner, and they're just there. And it's not like they're going to be inviting Cincinnati or someone. I mean, maybe that would be a direction Notre Dame would push. Like, let's get Cincinnati. That's a big Catholic region. Give them more of a closer rival. But just in terms of like bigger names, if you really want to get a bigger TV contract, bring in West Virginia. They're well known. They're good in basketball, which fits with the rest of the conference. I know the academics thing has been looked at, but you invited Louisville, so you can't hide behind that. And so do that, or like I said, maybe settle for Cincinnati. I don't know who else Notre Dame would want to bring in that would be close, unless they could try to swing like a Penn State, but because that's been rumored, trying to get them in. But at that point, it's almost like if you bring in Penn State, then that's a little too big. Because like, why would Notre Dame come where they're going to be having a rivalry where they lose maybe half the time? Like, why? Why would you do that to yourself? Like, if you're going to look at it and you're going to say like, oh, well, we could beat West Virginia. Okay, well then invite them. You can beat Cincinnati. All right, well then we'll invite them. Like, I just don't see, like, why would you put yourself in a situation where you could be like where Michigan's at in a few years, where you just can't beat your rival and then you're stuck. And there's no way above that. So that's the one thing I don't think. Penn State's also awful at basketball. I mean, Pitt couldn't even get wins in basketball in the ACC after a while. So in terms of like long-term points, that's what I'm looking at for the ACC. So I think Narduzzi's speaking out a little bit, and it's something that I was feeling too during the weekend. It was almost like this feels so good with this Notre Dame and Clemson, because normally Notre Dame's really only big games are like what, against Michigan, Michigan State, USC. I mean, that's it, right?
Yeah.
Besides whoever else, like they always play like some other random team like Georgia the other year, but at some points, like how are you going to sell a television contract when you don't know? And I know it's like a pandemic year, but it really highlights why that's not working for them. Because if the ACC would have said no this year, where would they have been? And I think maybe it's the long play where they're like, look how good this is. Look at that Clemson game where you guys stormed the field. Like, normally you wouldn't have had that matchup at all. Like, Notre Dame would have been in the same boat as BYU, where it's like, okay, well, where are their big wins? Oh, they beat Michigan State. Like, they're awful. They lost to Rutgers. Okay, well, USC, well, they didn't play USC because of the pandemic. It's like, they would have been in the same exact situation as BYU. They've been playing Navy and a bunch of other teams, maybe Liberty or whatever other independents they could get out there. But that's my big thing for this week. And I think the ACC, they could become, if they want to be one of those top dogs, and I know they're one of the conferences that hasn't missed the playoffs, but I think that's just because it's such a limited scope. It's only been there for a few years, and luckily it's been during the Clemson run. Like if the playoffs would have started a decade ago, there would have been plenty of years where the ACC wasn't making it. So in terms of long term, now you're in a position of strength. Get the money to back that up. I think that's how they do it. There's really no other offer that they could put out there. And that's what I would just say, Notre Dame, who would you want to bring with you? And if I was West Virginia, I'd be already making that call. I'd be calling Pitt and calling Notre Dame and saying like, hey, Notre Dame, that game was really great against Clemson. You should join that conference and take us with you. Because why not? Get some of those rivalries. I bet Pitt would be for it because like you said, there's no recruiting there or whatever. And I know Notre Dame would then be the team out on the island. Louisville's kind of close though. Like I said, the only other team would be Cincinnati, maybe. I just don't think they have that much history with them. They weren't really in the Big East that long, I don't think.
And to bring up a point that I never really considered before that you'd made was that if you bring West Virginia back into the mix, that also gives you another advantage as far as recruiting within the Pittsburgh area, that you can say, if you stay home, you're with your family's within driving distance of West Virginia, that there's another game that you're going to be able to make. So then you're looking at, within some of the local areas, you're not necessarily being as spread as thin as you would be with the way that the ACC is kind of spread out right now.
Well, I know that's one of the big things. That's just something that I know Michigan uses. And like same with like Penn State, when they poach all those kids from Maryland and New Jersey, it's kind of like, look, we play a game at Rutgers and we bring more fans than your team even gets. So like it's another home game for you, basically. Like why would you stay home? So like West Virginia and Pitt could be using that same exact logic. And even just going back to like the old map, I don't even know if they have like the old Big East map. Yeah, Cincinnati was only in it in 2013. Like they weren't even there, I don't think, when Notre Dame was there. So besides like other, like I guess it looks like women's lacrosse might have been there longer. But outside of that, it's almost like, okay, what are you really looking at just in terms of football? Who else could they get? Because none of these other conference teams even are in here have football. I mean, like Rutgers in the Big Ten, they're not going to get them. Connecticut, like that would be an awful ad. Their football team's nowhere near top. Like if ACC added them, it would almost be like a head-scratching move. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, that would be a step back.
So, I mean, they already have the upper north with like Boston College and Syracuse. Like, you don't need to add another like Connecticut. Like, let them do their own thing. They might as well just go independent at that point. So that's my thing, because I think right now Notre Dame, if they can't get those games into Florida, Like they're losing that recruiting. And I think that's where it really fell off, where before they had the games with Miami, they could say, like, look, come up to Notre Dame. We're going to be playing in Miami like every other year. Like you can see your kid play like a couple times. And if you in the ACC now, you even have more options. It's not just like Miami and whoever else is down there. Like Miami used to be on their own island by themselves. But Notre Dame could bring that back. And it might even help like Miami bring some of those other kids because they're still technically like a private school anyway. And it might help elevate some of the other recruiting just because you can then pull kids from like the East Coast, like the upper East Coast, where right now it's really tough to break them out of the Big Ten. And so now if Notre Dame's able to break them, then why not? So I think that's been my big thing. The other thing I had on here was like coaches getting fired because Penn State got killed, Michigan got killed. And so if you want to hear our thoughts on that, just go listen to last week's show. I don't think either coach has fire. The one thing that I keep hearing is, oh, you can't fire a coach because of coronavirus. Like that's a bad look. But what people don't understand, the state isn't paying their salaries. Like that's boosters. So like if a booster wants to just cut a check and say like fire that guy, it's going to happen. Gary Anderson was fired at Utah State already. And that was a guy that I thought was crazy. I thought there was going to be a scandal, and you can go back and listen to it because I remember vividly that when he left Oregon State in the middle of the year for no reason, like it just smelled like a scandal. And so maybe this goes into my point with like Jim Harbaugh and James Franklin. At some point, it's kind of just like the coach just gives up. Like there's no fire. And I'm not saying that it's going to be an every year thing. Both teams had players opt out that, like realistically, Michigan's weakness has been their corner. They have an NFL corner that opts out right before the season. You could say that you could argue that if he played, Michigan could be undefeated right now, and there's no hot seat talk at all. I mean, Penn State lost their top defender. So I don't know. Everyone knows that like one player doesn't make a team, but one player makes enough plays in some of these close games. I mean, Penn State lost to Indiana by a point in overtime on a 2-point conversion that is just crazy, like a stretch out, whatever. So if he plays, does that happen? Penn State probably gets that win, has some momentum. They shut down Maryland or whatever. I don't know, but that's the one thing. The other one was like Muschamp was rumored to be fired, but I don't think he actually did get fired.
I think it's pretty darn close. I think the writing's on the wall.
But I think that's where you get the same thing with these other guys. You're in the middle of a pandemic. It's a crazy year. Do you think it buys them another year?
I think it depends on how long they've been there. Like if they're like, I feel like with Muschamp, he's been there long enough that he needs to crap or get off the pot at this point. Like start winning some games that matter or get going, because the longer that they drag it out, to me, I think the hot seat really kicks in to me once you've been able to recruit a full class. When you have that first full cycle, I think at that point, those are the guys that you selected. Those are the guys that you wanted. You had a couple years to figure out what the assistant coaching situation is going to be, and to try to get some consistency there. And until you have that opportunity to turn the class over, I think it's tough to justify firing someone unless there's serious circumstances.
He was kind of a stopgap hire, though, to begin with. I mean, like, you couldn't really think of what he did at Florida. If he failed at Florida with all their advantages, like, South Carolina couldn't think, like, oh, yeah, this guy's going to be getting us back where we were with Steve Spurrier. Like, unless they were crazy, there's no way they thought that. So you're almost kind of just like, all right, he's going to get us some consistency, and if he's not getting that, then go ahead and get rid of him. I mean, it's the same thing. Like Penn State, Michigan, I think are the exact same this year. The issues are transfers. And if you've been there for like 6 years or 7 years, whatever it's been, you can't complain about your roster spot if you have so many transfers. At some point, it's on you. Like, are you lying to the kids when they come in as recruits? Are you just processing them out? Like, do they not just fit the scheme and you're doing bad evaluations? Like, all those add up to coaching. And so, like, you can't say, like, oh, well, the roster's young. Because I hear that excuse from both programs. Like, this was supposed to be the year, or last year was supposed to be the year, and they tanked, or, like, they didn't tank last year, but it hasn't happened. And so, like, at some point, yeah, it is on the coach. Like, that's part of their job. And maybe that pushes Harbaugh back to the NFL where he says, like, you know what? That is the part that I don't like. And that's why I have been stressed out, because I can't control the roster. And I mean, like, if you're the Jets, why would you not take a chance at him? I mean, like, who knows? Because that's one of the things where, like, they keep saying, like, one of the NFL guys I sent you, I think, for the show, I couldn't find it, but they were saying, like, oh, we heard Jim Harbaugh's name's floating around for the NFL now. And the one guy said, like, I've talked to NFL coach or NFL GMs, like, that would never happen, or owners or whatever. Like, his name's not even in consideration. Because, like, you can't take a guy that hasn't had success and then get the fans excited. But, I mean, if he did show up, like, I would think that there would be certain fan bases that would be super over the top excited. Like, even if he just took a jump to the Lions, like, are they even excited for one win? Like, they would have to be, okay, this is a positive move. Any positive move from a guy that was at the Super Bowl level. Maybe he doesn't have the fire anymore. I don't know. But for James Franklin's point, I don't know where he would be considering to go. If he moved his family to Florida, I always thought possibly USC. This goes back to the question, do they fire Clay Helton this year? Like, it's going to be a weird year. They could very well only have a loss or two. They almost started off with one. Herm. Oh, man. So close. Because then that would have heated things up. But now it's like, oh, USC got their win. They're going to be in the playoff talk the entire year because they started so late. As long as they don't choke. And if he gets them like 6-2, that job doesn't open up. If that was really where James Franklin's looking, I mean, this coronavirus stuff could have just killed his entire thing, and then he starts to go on a decline. Like, I just don't know. Does he just step away? There's no openings in Florida. So him moving there, I don't think it's a red flag for Penn State fans like they're making it out to be. Because there's really nowhere for them to go unless he's trying to jump up in like Jacksonville or something and go to the NFL himself. So, I don't know. Those are my last big topics. You got anything else?
No.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. I was going to pick the LSU-Alabama game, but that game is postponed now, or did they just cancel it because of the coronavirus?
At this point, I think they just canceled it.
Because that's one of the things. I mean, if they're going to be making that call, I really hope they just cancel that Ohio State game with Michigan, because that'd be a lifesaver. Which brings me back, because I talked about why wouldn't Wisconsin just cancel half their games? Apparently, if Wisconsin cancels one more game, they're done. Like, even if they're undefeated, like let's say they go 5-0 or 6-0, whatever it would be, they can't be in the Big Ten championship game because they hadn't hit that limit. So right now, that's going to be. I know Michigan's on the decline.
So they're just living in a bubble right now, is what you're saying.
Yes, I want you to predict that game. It's at Michigan. Wisconsin has guys that haven't practiced for, it's going to be 3 weeks there. Like, they're going to be able to practice and then play. What do you predict for that game? Who you got?
Well, I think Michigan's going to win.
Why?
Because I think with all of where I was being a smart aleck when you had said, oh yeah, there's no way with 3 weeks off that those guys are ready to play. But if they're out in quarantine, they're not allowed to be around the facility. There's no way they're running and conditioning and training and preparing the way that you would at the facility. And if you're telling me otherwise, look at how many injuries we're dealing with because of COVID. It's not happening.
So don't forget, they do have the Alabama game marked as postponed, but we'll see. But going back to my point, I know they're going to be out of shape. but it's not like Michigan is stopping anyone on defense. I was watching. I don't know who was announcing the game, but they were like, Michigan went to a press zone, and the whole issue with the cornerbacks, they're playing press man, so immediately they're getting burnt every play. Going to a press zone, unless you have help over the top on both sides, which of course they didn't. They're playing like a single safety press zone. I don't even know what they're doing. And then the guy's like, well, see, that's why Michigan fans, they think they're smarter than they are. They want them to go to a zone, and they're still getting burnt. Back the guy off 10 yards. If he's back 10 yards, he's not going to get burnt every play. Like, come on, don't be an idiot. Like, if he's up there, I don't understand why. Like, the guys are going to get burnt every play. They didn't get as many penalties this past week against Indiana, but I don't think Penix is that accurate. And now you have a top 10 Indiana team. So it's like, what are you doing? I don't think Michigan is going to win because the offense, the same criticism I had against some of the NFL guys, and maybe it's Harbaugh being in the NFL. He goes back in, quarterback never pulls the ball, which has to be a coaching thing. Because that first week, pulled the ball late in that game against Minnesota. The offense started clicking after that. Hasn't pulled it since, I don't think. So it's like, did the coach get in his ear? Because you can't tell me that Shea Patterson never wanted to run the ball. Now Joe Milton never wanted to run the ball. You can't keep blaming it on the quarterbacks. If every single quarterback...
Damn quarterbacks don't want to pull the ball. They're afraid.
Yeah, well, that's how it seems like. It seems like...
They're eating that scared protein.
It can't be every single quarterback is bad. Like, Wisconsin's playing a freshman quarterback. Are you kidding me? Like, you can't be a quarterback whisperer and then say, because that would be the one thing if the Jets drafted Trevor Lawrence and then brought Harbaugh up to ruin him.
Now he has his quarterback, like Jimmy Johnson.
Harbaugh's best spot would be is if he would match up with a veteran quarterback, someone that could push back, because that's where I think he would really be at his strength. Well, right now, Shea Patterson came in and was supposed to do that, but he got hurt. And so after that, he always played like a little scared. I think it was a Notre Dame game. They pulled him or whatever. And so after that, he was like, yes, coach, I'll do whatever you want. So I don't know. You think that they're going to win that one, but I don't think they are. What about this game? Western Carolina, Liberty. Western Carolina's 0-0. They haven't played.
Liberty
needs to win.
They need to keep on winning.
Because I want them to win out. They have to play. They came, which let me talk about. This is my last thing. I know we're going long now. Virginia Tech. What the hell are you doing? Why are you icing the kicker on a 59-yard field goal? Because they were like, yeah, go ahead. Let's ice the kicker. Because I had some stats for you. I know they tried to do like data on it a few years ago. And it works sometimes. But the data shows that it works on super long field goals. How do you know those field goals weren't going to miss anyway? Like long field goals after a certain point are just a crapshoot. So the numbers from like close range, it's like 90 to 92%. And the iced ones, like it's such a smaller group that if you added more, it might be the exact same. So like it might work slightly more. Anything, the big range comes in after 45 or more. But like I said, field goals regularly without icing is 50%. Iced is 26%. But you're already at the end of game situation when you're icing, because you're not icing on a 50-yard field goal first quarter. Like you're just not. So the guy's either going to make it or miss it. That's 50-50. So icing it, if you're at the end of the game, that guy's already nervous as crap. He knows he has to kick it low. Just load the box and block it. That's what Virginia Tech did. They blocked it, take it to the house to win. But the coach had iced the kicker. Because coaches always play the smart man. I always wondered if the coach, instead of, because they let him line it up and then like do like a practice kick or like go through the motions. To me, if you're icing me, I think that would calm me down. Like I think the coach should just call the timeout and then have his players just like chant at that guy or do like something psychological, like miss it. Like what if the defense just all stood there and just chanted miss it for like 30 seconds after the thing, or like, oh yeah, we got this. Like just get in the guy's head. So where like what if they just all said it wide left, wide left so that the kicker goes up and he's like, well, crap, I can't go wide left. like why not? Like, try to do something crazy. That's what I would do. So, of course, they come in, and then Virginia Tech with the worst coaching move that I thought of all time. It was 4th and 6. They put like 5, 6 guys in the end zone. They had no one up. Liberty just ran a quick out, got the first down, got like 10 yards, and then kicked the field goal. And so they didn't even throw the Hail Mary because there were still 8 seconds on the clock. Who goes into full prevent with like no one blitzing or anything and lets a guy wide open? Like, he caught the ball, and he could have made the decision to like try to get a couple more yards, but I mean, I'm sure coach was like, get out of bounds.
Well, that's the thing that I've kind of liked with following Liberty now with Hugh Freeze there, is that he runs a relatively basic offense, but he just the players make the reads. You know, going back to some of the stuff that you were venting about with Michigan's quarterbacks, it's like he has Malik Willis, and he just makes the right reads at the right times, and it's fun to watch.
And that's where, like, at some point, like the coaching, like the stuff, making the reads, you got to make the calls. And if you're going to go undefeated like Liberty is right now, I don't know if they're going to go all the way, but you have to be able to make the coaching calls like that. And it's smart coaching. Like, Virginia Tech was thoroughly outcoached at the end of the game. I know Liberty was setting up for that long 4th down field goal. They iced them. And then after the icing, the Virginia Tech's coach Muzzle just left the stadium. Like, all right, I'm out. Because, like, at this point, I'm just going to lose the game for you guys. Like, let's go full prevent, do whatever we need to do. I don't know. I mean, SEC has 3 games postponed, so there's not really any ones to pick. Anything else you want to talk about for the final bell?
Just for those of you who tend to do your holiday shopping a little bit earlier, you should go to our website. Maybe find something that you'd like.
Yeah, check that out, southboundsports.com. I also forgot to mention last week, Claysburg. I put up on the website that your season was pretty much canceled because of coronavirus. So, unfortunate, crappy season. So, if you were looking for the games, that's why I forgot to mention off the top of the show 2 weeks in a row. Get too excited with the Steelers winning, so that's it. Check it out. Southboundsports.com. Tell your friends. Numbers, getting some pretty good numbers. Steelers keep winning. So thank you for everyone that's listening, and we will see you next week.